In this episode, I had a fun time interviewing a online friend, and I am a terrible, terrible host. Didn't know what I was doing behind the scenes. He was able to explain some things to me on how it was going to record. I am thankful for him on that. My computer winds up cutting out around the hour and 25-minute mark. You can still hear my guest speak, and then it goes quiet for about 2 minutes. I didn't want to do too much editing, so there'll be that, and then you'll most likely be hearing my infant daughter in the background and one of my other daughters walking in and out of the room. But I hope you enjoy the episode, and cue the music. Welcome back to the highly unanticipated, very unprofessional, and extremely boring podcast you always knew you didn't need, Learning Lutheran, where we walk through the Lutheran distinctives. I haven't posted an episode in I don't know how long. I've had a lot going on. I did post an update not too long ago, but I don't even remember what was even in it. But to recap, I am officially Lutheran now. We have joined our local congregation as communing members. That was Palm Sunday. But unfortunately, I got to miss Easter Sunday because I was in the hospital with pneumonia, sepsis, and some other stuff. But I'm back here now with a guest, my first non-local guest, Micah Spence, who is a co-host of City Squared podcast, and I will let him introduce himself now.
How much of a bio do you want?
Whatever you feel like.
All right, I'll give
Do what?
I can give the Cliff Notes version then.
Yeah, give the Cliff Notes, and then we'll walk through like starting in your childhood, but just a basic cap of where you're at right now and about your podcast.
Sure, yeah. So my name is Micah. I live in the DFW area. I've been here in this area for about 13 years. Grew up in Canada. Went to college in California. Met my wife there. She's from Ohio. We met in California, dated for several years. We're engaged for about a year. Got married, moved to Texas. Graduated, got married, moved to Texas. And then I am what some might call a corporate drone. So I work, for most of my career, I worked in an office. Now I'm full-time, work from home, and work for I want to say workers' compensation company in a sense, occupational medicine. So we handle a lot of workers' compensation injuries, physicals, drug screens, things like that. So if you are an employee of a big company in the States, you've probably gone to one of my clinics. So okay. I help out managing a team that's on the strategic side of things where we deal with our biggest clients. So we're in the middle of sales and operations basically. So, yeah. And then I am former Baptist, now Lutheran, layman in the church, nothing fancy. Been married for 13 years, have 2 kids, 8 and 2-year-old. And I like mowing the lawn on the weekends, so, except in the heat.
Yes, it is very hot. Like I'm about 4.5 hours south of you, so that's about 4 hours and a half closer to the equator, and it is hot down here. But I imagine it's still hot even there.
Yeah, we're in triple digits this week, so
Yes,
really the
and
first time this summer that we've been. Yeah,
yeah,
so
and like I work outside in the cement industry, and it today was a Monday of Mondays, and it was fun. Just every time we'd get going, something would make a shutdown, and it turned an 8 hour day into a 12 hour day. But made it home safe and
oh
sound,
yeah,
so
man,
praise God.
that's good.
So you gave the Cliff Notes version. So where exactly in Canada did you grow up?
So I was born on the extreme east of Canada, or maybe not the extreme east, but pretty east in Nova Scotia. Lived there for a few years, and then we moved around a little bit to Ontario, a few different cities in Ontario. And then when I was around 5, can't remember exactly when, but around five and 6, we moved to British Columbia. My father took a pastorate in British Columbia, so a town
Mm,
um, that's about 45 minutes east of Vancouver, British Columbia. And that's where I basically grew up. Spent, until I went off to college, that's where we lived. So
And so Nova Scotia.
it's a beautiful
See if
area.
my
Yeah.
see if my geography is correct. I'm terrible at it, but that's near, not far from Newfoundland, is it?
Man, my geography's bad too.
Like I looked, I like.
Newfoundland, yeah, Newfoundland is. Go for it.
Yeah, I like maps. I've got maps like all over, but I'm terrible at actual geography. But I was looking at a map the other day, and I'm pretty sure they're like really close together, like a lot closer than Texas and
Ye-
Canada is.
Yeah, so Newfoundland is an island off
Oh, it's
the, I guess,
so
I
I'm
guess you could say
pronouncing it
East
wrong.
Coast. Yeah, yeah, they don't enunciate every syllable like that. Um, so yeah, Newfoundland is not actually mainland Canada, but they are relatively close together. So Nova Scotia
Yeah.
would be kind of on the east of Canada, and then you've got Prince Edward Island, which if you're familiar with Anne of Green Gables, that's where Anne of Green Gables took place.
Okay.
Um, so yeah, and then like a little further out is Newfoundland. So
Um.
I've never been, but my folks have.
Yeah. So, you said you went to um, college in California. I
Hmm.
guess we're getting a little ahead of with that question, but my pastor actually is from California, and met a girl from Houston, Texas, and married her. And they met on online, which me and my wife did too. I think he went through a dating app though, but we just happened to have met on Facebook and hit it off. I was in a band and blah 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 blah. Next thing you know, we're married. But so
Nice.
what type of church did you grow up in?
So I grew up in the independent fundamental Baptist movement,
Mm,
which there are different there are different sections of that movement, different stripes within that. So I grew up in kind of a conservative yet nice version. There are some that are kind of defined by combativeness and kind of crazy antics and that sort of thing.
yeah.
But did grow up very conservative, fundamental, KJV only. Um, you know, a lot of external standards are kind of enforced.
Mhm.
In some ways, very legalistically.
Yeah.
But but yeah, so I grew up as a PK, a pastor's kid, in that movement. And for the most part, like my parents were not hypocrites, so they practiced what
Mhm.
they preached. But my mom never wore never wore pants. We didn't listen to rock music or jazz or anything that would fall under the non like sacred or classical genres. Um,
Yeah.
so
Yeah. And when we were talking on your podcast, which I will link in the description below, I'll link that episode and y'all's first episode, which is Facebook's algorithm is actually it worked in my favor, and that's how I happened to come across y'all. And it was from your first episode, and I don't remember what it said, but I was like, "Hey, I like that," and I agreed with it, and I checked y'all out and
hmm,
watched the whole episode because it was just like a little 3-4 minute clip or something like that of y'all's first episode. I think it was the first episode. Was were you the first episode or was John?
yeah, so John interviewing me was the first episode, and
Okay,
then
sweet.
second one I interviewed John. Yeah, I
All
think
right.
it's been a few months now.
Yeah.
So uh,
And I think y'all posted that first episode about the same time I posted my first episode, but y'all are a lot more organized than I am, at least from the outside point of view. And uh and y'all already had like a back catalog of stuff recorded, whereas I hit record and then uploaded the same day. And I've fallen
mhm.
behind and I haven't posted in a couple months. But
Yeah, we had it in the works for about a year, honestly. Um, we started kicking around the idea back in 2021, I want to say. Um, yeah. And then we started kind of laying some groundwork, but I was in the middle of house hunting and I had just had my second kid. So it was kind of a chaotic time. And so it got
yeah.
pushed back a little bit. And then we started recording episodes so that we would have a bit of a backlog when we started uploading because we
Yeah.
didn't want to, run into potential scenarios where we weren't uploading consistently.
Like
Because that's one of the number one
yeah.
recommendations is upload. If you want to grow an
Yeah.
audience, you have to, of course, have interesting and well produced content, so to speak.
And
Not
that was
perfect, but
yeah. And that was my idea, and I was actually going to start doing walking through the Westminster Larger Catechism because when I first started wanting to do the podcast, I was still on the Reform side of things, and
mm,
I did have a few stuff recorded, and but there's no Reformed churches around me, and then that's how I wound up landing in
mm.
a Lutheran church, and you could say I was predestined to be Lutheran. I don't know, but
Hey, we still believe in predestination.
and but so once I started attending the Lutheran church, I was like, all right, I'm gonna scrap the Westminster idea, even though it would have given me a good 200 plus episodes to walk through and take an honest look at Lutheranism within a podcast. Just get me thinking about it, not to get famous or nothing, but it would get me talking and thinking about it actively. And I haven't done a very good job with the podcast, but I have been reading a bunch and learning a lot and have
Hmm.
come full circle into I might not understand everything, have an infant understanding of other stuff, but I've come to not just verbally uh, confess it, but actually confess it. But so this is not about me.
Yeah.
This is about you. Uh, so you were a pastor's kid, and again, I said it wasn't about me, but I wasn't a pastor's kid, but I was a my grandpa was a pastor, and I grew up same thing as you know, and just kind of reformed ish, uh, Calvinistic. I'll just say Calvinistic IFB, and to be on the safer side because I know some reformed folk are like Baptist ain't reformed, but uh so did how was the upbringing in that? Like, was it positive, mostly positive? Was there some negative?
Hmm. That's a good question. For me, looking back on it now, I could say that it was almost completely positive.
Mhm.
Um, so I kind of touched on how my parents, they were not hypocrites by any means.
Yeah.
I knew some I knew some people in that movement who would verbally, and maybe verbally and physically like subscribe to the teachings, but then they would be at church and they would look like everyone else, but then they kind of lived like a normal person during the week,
Yeah.
and that kind of grated on me a little bit because we didn't live like normal people, um, which looking back is probably a positive thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
So at least for the most part. But yeah, we were, my mom was a stay-at-home mom. We were homeschooled for most of my life. Dad was a pastor, so he worked, out of the house, and so we were just around our family the whole time.
Yeah.
Um, didn't really do a whole lot. We had a few like homeschool co-op things we did, and we had church friends and friends in other churches and stuff like that. But I would say it was overall, like, I look back and it was very positive. Like we were a little behind, when it comes to pop culture and
Yeah.
things like that. Like we didn't really start watching movies or the TV or we didn't start watching like modern movies
Mhm.
until I was probably in my early teens.
Yeah.
Um, so like we might have watched some old black and white Disney or John Wayne westerns or things along those lines, but we really didn't keep up with anything current. So
Yeah.
like I didn't watch Star Wars until I was in my teens.
Yeah. And see,
Um,
I
and
can
we,
relate.
yeah.
Go ahead.
Oh yeah, I was gonna say we had kind of strict rules around music as well.
Yeah.
Those are the two big pop culture things that we were limited on,
Yeah.
probably.
And I can relate to that a lot. Except for the Star Wars thing, I'm actually really surprised about that. Not for you, but like for me, like my side of it, because like whenever we'd go over to my grandpa's house, which was every Sunday, it was, and we've actually continued that tradition with my family. We go to after church every Sunday. We go over to my parents. But anyway, um, uh, when we go over there, he didn't have cable or nothing, but he had old VHSs of Little Rascals, Shirley Temple, and a bunch of John Wayne movies, and that's where my love of John Wayne comes from. But and old
Hmm.
westerns. But my grandpa, for whatever reason, my grandpa liked Star Wars, and like looking, I mean, there was things he didn't like about it, and for some reason, he thought George Lucas actually believed in the Force and had like a religion behind it, and that I remember him telling me about it. So for the longest time, I actually thought like George Lucas had this force church type thing going on because of what my grandpa had told me. But 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 yeah, he liked Star Wars for whatever reason, and uh, but yeah, I can relate. Other than not watching Star Wars until I was a teen, I can relate to the other stuff because of that. But on the other hand, my dad, he grew up in church, but he grew up in the Disciples of Christ, and which is, are you familiar with that denomination?
Yes, a little bit.
Yeah, I think it's an
Are they?
offshoot of Church of Christ.
Mm-hmm.
and I don't know
Yeah,
much
they're
about it other than my papa has been at this one church. Him and my mama made it before she passed away 60 years at this one congregation. And it's one of the,
wow.
I think it's the oldest congregation in our county. But
Hmm.
it sadly though, it is dying. Um, I don't know. I mean, God might grant it more life and it might last longer than I'm thinking, but I think it is close to doors shutting. But the
Hmm.
congregation's been there for since the 1800s. And but anyway,
Yeah.
but my dad, he was more uh I don't know how to put it. What's the word I'm looking for? Like a it's like, yeah, I was born into this and I believe it, but my life don't necessarily reflect it type of thing. Like you wouldn't really know unless he said it. What's the word I'm looking
Hmm.
for that though? I can't remember. Anyway, so like I grew up listening to like Led Zeppelin and stuff like that because of my dad. Uh if my grandpa would have had any say so, it would have only been like bluegrass music. And he actually wanted to start a
Mm-hmm.
bluegrass band with me, but looking back, I kind of regret not doing it now. But when he was wanting me to do it, I was like 16, and I was like, no, I'm too cool for that. Like bluegrass is dead. But it would have been something for me to bond with my grandpa over if I would have done it.
Yeah.
And
Hmm.
but yeah, for me too, it was largely a positive experience, and looking back, I can actually contribute what some of what I learned from my grandpa is helping me become Lutheran, of taking the Bible seriously and reading it literally. But I will say it seems that my grandpa was probably like your typical, besides being Calvinist, he was your typical dispensationalist, like I guess most IFB would be. And so where Lutherans will take things literally, the IFB dispensationalist, whoever won't, they'll allegorically or however else. It's all symbolic in that areas, but then the things that are actually symbolic, they'll take literally. So it's kind of just
Yeah.
a
Yep.
reversal.
There's
And
some interesting switching going on.
yeah. Uh so did so you went to like high school and all that in Canada?
Homeschooled, yeah. Homeschooled and
Homes
all the
Oh
way
yeah,
through.
yeah, homeschool. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I was
Don't really
public school.
recommend it.
You don't?
I recommend homeschooling if you're going to be actively engaged in your child's education.
Yeah.
If at some point it becomes too much, then it's probably better to get your kids some help, like and
Yeah.
actual instruction. And
Yep.
it depends on the kid too. So like when I went from an homeschool environment to a college classroom, and I just
Mhm.
like thrived. Like I loved it. I
Yeah.
loved being there socially with other people, learning with other people, having a teacher you could ask questions of. There's some good competition and camaraderie and
Mhm.
stuff that are in a classroom that you don't get when you're sitting by yourself in your bedroom. So you know, so yeah, if you can do like, I know a lot of homeschoolers. I've got friends, homeschool, public school, Christian school, all
Mhm.
over the place. And there's lots of great programs now for homeschoolers that there wasn't back in the day. Um, but yeah, I kind of stopped being educated by someone other than myself in high school,
Yeah.
like early high school, and I was just kind of left to my own devices because my mom, who was our teacher, couldn't really handle, the curriculum and et cetera, et cetera. So, yeah.
There's my wife.
Oh, hey. It's a pixelated blur in the background.
He said you're a pixelated blur in the background. I'll keep that in there. I don't do too much editing.
We don't edit this stuff.
Darn, I just forgot what we were. Oh yeah, the homeschool. And
Yeah.
I've actually wanted to. I was public school, and so was my wife. I've wanted to get into homeschooling my kids, but it would all be pretty much thrown on my wife, and she don't want to do that, and I understand, so I ain't gonna fight for it.
Yeah.
The
Our daughter is in a good.
the school my kids are in, it's really small. You don't have to duck down. Is really small. There's probably only like 30, 40 kids per grade, and there's only two campuses from between kindergarten and 12th grade. So we're in a very, very rural area. And so the school's small, and because of that, it is mostly conservative. And I know that don't always mean Christian, but value wise, it's more on the conservative side. There's a few that aren't, but they're not, because it's such a conservative area. They're not going to be as vocal.
Yeah.
But the school seems to be really good. My kids are thriving there, so I'm happy with that.
Yeah. My oldest is in a public charter, but it's a classical school. So they've got a quote on the wall from Saul of Tarsus,
Yeah.
So it's a lot of Christian teachers. I think the two headmasters are the headmaster over the school and then the lower school. They've got lower and upper school. They're both believers as far as I know. I know the one is definitely. So it's about as Christian of a school as you can get without being an actual Christian school.
I'm sure it's more of a non-denominational type of Christian school, or is it Lutheran?
No, it's not. It's not actually an official Christian school.
Okay.
It's classical education, but it is a public charter. They were affiliated with Hillsdale College for a while.
Okay.
But the organization that they're part of is, it's conservative, at least for the education piece. So it's definitely not a leftist public school,
Yeah. So like, how is there a strong Lutheran presence in your area, or not really?
Well, it's DFW, so it's one of the buckles on the Bible Belt, I guess you could say.
Yeah.
The majority presence in this area is going to be some form of Baptist.
Yeah.
So you've got, like in Dallas, you've got First Baptist Dallas. In Plano, you've got Prestonwood. Those are both like massive, Southern Baptist to the core mega churches. Within 3 miles of me, there's like 3 fundamental Baptist churches. Mm-hmm. There's a number of small Southern Baptist ones, mid-sized Southern Baptist ones. So I'd say and then there's tons of like the non-denominational kind of version of those as well. So yeah, I'd say it's majority Baptist. There are a few Reformed churches. Yeah, there are a few Reformed churches in the area, but they tend to be a little smaller. We do have some progressive churches. Well, they're probably more conservative than the average progressive church in, say, California or whatever.
Yeah.
But There's a big United Methodist one. There's an ELCA congregation. So, but it is a very it's still a conservative area. I'm in a suburb of DFW, so like on my way to church, we drive past a Wells congregation to go to our LCMS congregation.
Okay.
And then there's a few others that are within reasonable driving distance as well, but it definitely is majority Baptist.
There are 0 wells around here. There's actually only 3 LCMS congregations near me. I think it's 3. It might be 4. Yeah, I think it's 4. I'm not sure how many ELCA there are. I think there might be only a handful of those. Honestly, didn't even know we had any Lutherans around here until me and my wife started looking for a new church, and I was like, I'm not going back Methodist. I'm not going back Baptist. There's no Reformed around here, which she didn't want to go Reformed anyway. But so I started just looking. I definitely didn't want to go charismatic either. And I was like, oh, okay, cool. Here's a Lutheran church. I don't know much about it other than I knew a little bit about Martin Luther, and I knew they were confessional, liturgical. I was like, let's just try this out. I think it'll give you being Wesley and me being you being my wife, and then me being coming from the Reform side. I was like, this is going to be, I think, the best compromise. And we both really like it. We both really like the pastor. He's only about, I think he's 35, so he's young for a pastor. But we both really like him. He distinguishes between law and gospel really well. He gets to the point. There's no rambling for 40 minutes to a 40-minute long joke, like pretty much is because that sometimes when we were in as much as we loved the people there, but I mean, it got to the point where it was just like a 40-minute long joke was the sermon. And it was just like, oh, man, like really? And but like other than that, like being in the IFB there, well, I mean, I say other than that, there was other theological issues, but like as far as the people went, how we were treated, like they were the best people that you could ask to be around. It just, like I've told you before, he said Jesus never died behind the pulpit, and it's just like, what? Yeah. And the associate pastor had literally told me he'd rather have that zealous energy and get something wrong than be boring and orthodox. And it was like, nah, give me that orthodox all day long. I don't care how much like Ben Stein you sound. I want it to be truth. But yeah, so around here it's very, very, very Methodabdicostal with some Roman Catholic churches sprinkled in there. But like even all of them, like Methodist, Pentecostal, they're all going to have like a flavor of Baptist in them around here. I don't know where that came about. I mean, obviously they'll differ because Methodist will baptize babies, but aside from that, everything's essentially Baptist, and just with their own little sprinklings around here. and I don't know. And it's very very charismatic area too. So that's also very
Mm,
heavy and all of them. But the more I've read on Wesley, the more I've realized how much of a mystic, charismatic he was, and never would have. I didn't realize that
yeah.
when we were in the Methodist church. Oh, my daughter walked in. Uh, but yeah. So, what did you want to be when you grew up?
Truthfully, I wanted to be a pastor. That's kind of what I saw modeled from my dad. And we had tons of theological discussions growing up, just as part of our daily life. So I kind of assumed I'd go into ministry of some type. And my older brother and older sister had both gone to the same Bible college, which was West Coast Baptist College in Lancaster, California. And so I kind of followed on. I was about 6 years younger than my brother and 3 years younger than my sister. And so they were both, my brother was graduated, and my sister, I think, was a senior when I went to college. Um, yeah, senior, I believe, or junior. I can't remember. So, but we had at least 1 year there at the same college.
Yeah.
So I've got a bachelor's in religious education, in church ministries, and that's kind of what I assumed I would do is
Yeah.
be in ministry of some kind. I was going to. I kind of got the internal call, you could say, or I had kind of an emotional experience and thought that I might be called to plant churches
Yeah.
because I was kind of pragmatically, I can look back and say, oh, I was kind of looking at the landscape of the churches and I wasn't really happy with how backward I felt they were in some ways. I grew up in a very small church and I went to school at a big church, with a college and all that
Mhm.
sort of thing. So numbers was the metric of success that I wanted. And,
Yeah.
I wanted to be essentially a contemporary Baptist.
Hmm.
Um, so I was kind of exploring that and thinking that that was what was going to happen. And, you know, um, I started reading some different guys and listening to some different guys in college. A couple of them at the time, it was Rick Warren and Andy Stanley, and they were kind of, they were at the time relatively conservative. They weren't like
Hmm.
out and out egalitarian,
Yeah.
affirming, what they're running the gamut now of kind of edginess, right? But at the time, they were just kind of like the seeker sensitive kind of innovator, types.
Yeah.
So I was reading some of their books, like books on preaching and books on leadership and things like that. And I kind of wanted to have just like a normal, everyday contemporary church. I didn't, I thought that was what you needed to do to reach people. And that
Hmm.
was the kind of church I wanted and blah, blah, blah. So I was going through that. I was reading those guys, got into a little bit of trouble in my senior year because they thought I was like trying to be divisive and trying to compromise. And, so I got hauled in front of a uh, kangaroo court of administrators and stuff
Yeah.
at the Bible college and kind of raked over the coals. So, but it was hilarious because I had been discussing this stuff with guys for like a couple of years, and Driscoll had come onto the scene about this time as well. This was in 2008, 2009, 2010.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, so we were discussing all this stuff, and then I was talking to a pastor friend of mine, and he said, "Okay," he's like, "You know what you need to do? This, the place you're at. Just put your head down. Don't talk about this with anything. Graduate, and then do what you want when you graduate." I was like, "All right." So I took that advice, and that was on a spring break. It was my final semester, and so I didn't talk to anybody for the next like 3 months, and I still somehow got in trouble over this. I still don't know. I don't know how to this day. Um, so But yeah, so we graduated in 2010. I had been engaged at that point for about a year, dating my wife. We started dating the end of our freshman year. So we'd been together for about 3 years at that point, or total. I think it was dating for two, engaged for an additional one, and then so 3 years total, courtship
Yeah.
and dating.
Me and my wife were
And
actually
then I moved to.
I was just
How
gonna
long
say
you guys
me and my
been
wife are actually
going
just
together?
we were from the time we were started dating to the time we were married was only like 5 months. 5 months. So we were very
Wow.
quick. And we were also both
Yeah, that's
young. She
quick.
was she was 19 and I was 21, and I'm
Hmm.
33 now.
Yeah,
And
we our parent both sides of our parents wanted us to graduate, and we wanted that too because we saw a lot of couples who got real excited, got married, and then they never actually finished their degrees.
yeah,
So we wanted to make sure that we actually finished our degrees and were ready to embark on life. Because the school we were at was very strict. Like it was more strict than either of our backgrounds or
hmm,
either of our homes growing up. So completely segregated dorms, no internet on campus, at least not personally. And this was before smartphones were ubiquitous
yeah,
everywhere. Um, so yeah, it was very kind of closed off. Boys and girls, men and women couldn't touch. You know, very, 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 very strict, kind of
yeah,
holiness Pentecostal in a way, even though it was
yeah,
Baptist. So yeah, so we graduated, and I didn't know what I was going to do. They had what they called interview days, and that was when the seniors would interview with different ministries and different pastors. It was kind of like speed dating, but you could get
yeah,
someone's information. You could talk to them about what you wanted to do. If they liked the look of you, they would follow up with you. So it was kind of like a job matching service for churches that needed Sunday school teachers, assistant pastors, school teachers, stuff like that. And my fiance at the time, we were sitting there, and I was like, I don't want to work for any of these people. I was like, I don't agree with any of them. I don't agree with how they teach sanctification and all this stuff. And really, it wasn't necessarily theological disagreement.
hmm,
It was more philosophical at the time, like philosophy of ministry and, you know, um, pragmatic stuff at the time.
yeah,
And so we were kind of sitting there like, well, what are we going to do? And she was getting kind of insecure and anxious because it's like, well, we need to get jobs.
yeah,
So my brother was living in Texas in this area actually at the time, and I ended up after graduation I moved and lived with him for a few months. I managed to land a job like basically the second week I was in Texas.
yeah,
The VP of HR at my current former VP of HR at my current company went to my brother's church, and she mentioned that they were hiring up in one of their offices in Plano. And so I was like, well, I just need a job. Like I was at the time thinking I'm still going to plant churches. I was there to attend and help a church plant in DFW. So I was thinking, well, I'll be a layman, and for a little while as I, do stuff with this church plant, and then we'll just get established and see where it goes. So that was the plan. I moved here in May 2010. I graduated in May 2010. Moved here, got a job, got an apartment, got a car with like a 21% interest rate because I didn't have any credit. Um, and kind of got a little 500 square foot apartment, air mattress and
hmm,
stuff like that. And then that was May of 2010. We got married July 3rd, 2010, and then flew down to Florida for a week honeymoon in a condo that one of my cousins owned. So I mean, we were dirt poor. Like
yeah,
we had, parents that looked out for us, but none of them were wealthy, so we weren't going to fall back on their generosity.
Yeah.
But then we flew to Florida for the honeymoon, back to Ohio where my wife's from. We packed all her stuff up in her little Toyota Camry and drove out to Texas. That was 2010, and the first 2 weeks we were here, it didn't get below 100 degrees.
Yeah.
And she thought, what the heck have I gotten myself into? So, and then I'm still with the same company. I've moved through different roles. And, God kind of revealed that I really wasn't actually legitimately called to be a church planter.
Mm-hmm.
And I realized that I probably wouldn't have been a good pastor either, because I have limited patience. If he truly called you, then he would equip you. Yeah. So I don't doubt that. But I think that it was sort of almost an idol of ministry, that I thought I was supposed to do. But I'm very content.
I think a lot of people fall into that, like of the idol of ministry. And I mean, I think you see it more within the celebrity pastor realm. Yeah. But that does answer my another question I was going to have is that if you still felt that calling or anything, but obviously you don't.
Yeah.
Do you ever get like a feeling though, like every now and then of like, oh, like I could do this or anything like that?
Every once in a while. But then I realized that I would need to go back to school for like 4 years.
Yeah.
So that at the current stage in life, I don't believe that is where I'm supposed to be.
Yeah. I used to think that.
So yeah, and I'm content with that.
I used to think that God was calling me to be a Christian rock star when I was younger, and I was going to be in this huge Christian metal band, and I love music. I play guitar, and I could pretty much. I might not be able to say I know how to play other instruments, but I can dabble enough for people who don't know anything about music. I can fool them into thinking I know what I'm doing. And but my ambition and zeal is a lot bigger than my talent. So I'd have like these ideas of like Trans-Siberian Orchestra sized theatric songs and concerts, but then I'm on a Dollar Tree sized skill level. And I mean, I'm probably not that bad, but like that's just a comparison, and it just my ideas definitely would outshine my actual talent, and I never would come down to my actual level. So that was my downfall. But I still kind of like, oh man, like I could see myself playing this, and like right now, the other day I was actually thinking about wanting to do a like Flame, how he's got the Lutheran rap albums. Like, oh man, I could be like a metal version of Flame now, and but then it's like, no, but heck, all my stuff got stolen like 5 years ago anyway, so I couldn't do it even if I wanted, even if I could.
That's a bummer. Well, yeah, we call that champagne taste on a beer budget where I'm from here. Everyone wants, top of the line but they're not willing to shell out for it. At least in the home reno space anyway, and around here. So, but so I've had thoughts like that. Like I tried when a few years ago, probably about 8 years ago. No, maybe 9, closer to 9. Yeah. I actually applied to grad school to DTS, Dallas Theological Seminary, And because I was getting kind of convinced that I should go kind of into ministry, but get my, what's the word I'm looking for? It's licensed LPC. Oh yeah, LPC, the licensed professional counselor. So I was kind of getting into that scene, like at my church. I was a home group leader, and we were kind of counseling different couples and different guys, and like it was a we were just in a lay role there.
Yeah.
And I was looking into different programs, and that was the one that was like, oh well, this is reputable and here and blah blah blah. So I did the. I'd been out of school for 4 years or something at that point, and went and took, what's it called? The it's not the GRE, but it's something like that. It's like basically a graduate exam to kind of show where you are academically, if you've been out of school for a while.
Yeah.
And I'm not good at math, but I'm decent at most of the other subjects. So I kind of breezed through it, at least time wise, maybe not actual results wise. But I think I did okay. I think I was average or above average, which, they're looking at. And DTS rejected me. And I was kind of bummed out. But a month later, we discovered that we were expecting.
Yeah.
And I immediately stopped feeling sorry for myself and thanked God that I wouldn't be in school for, I think that was I want to say 90 credit hour program or something like that. I don't know. I forget exactly how many credits it was, but it's extensive,
Yeah.
And I realized I didn't want to do that and, have a kid at the same time. So.
Yeah. When we were in the Methodist church and I think I brought this up to you on your podcast, but when they first asked me to be a youth pastor, was in the first Methodist church we were in, and I literally laughed in their face. But then the second time around, God had been working in me, and then I accepted it, and I don't think I had been doing it very long, and the pastor was like, "Hey, can you preach this Sunday?" And I'm like, "What?" And he's like, "Yeah, we like once a year we do a youth led worship service." And I was like, "Okay." And I thought it was weird then. I still think it's weird now, and out of order. But I was like, like, what do I know? So I agreed to it, and like he gave me like full reign to do whatever the heck I wanted. And like he didn't like I wrote a manuscript out. He didn't even ask to read it. He just let me get up there and go. And which I didn't say anything that would have been that would have undermined his authority or anything, but I was just surprised that he didn't, like make sure I wasn't getting out of line or anything. But anyway,
yeah.
After that, he told me.
I really enjoyed. Oh, keep going.
Go ahead. No, you can go ahead.
Oh yeah, I was gonna say I really enjoyed preaching. Like, that was something I really did enjoy. Teaching in Sunday school, preaching in services, like we took homiletics and that sort of thing. So, that was part of of something I really enjoy. I still enjoy speaking in essence. I'm now doing a podcast and I'm a manager, so I'm coaching people on my team constantly. And I can be kind of like, now that I've got that, I do have a background, right? I grew up as a pastor's son and was in church, multiple times a week, went to college, was just saturated in it. I've been in a ton of different styles of churches, and I can be kind of a critic when it comes to, I used to place a lot more value on how well the pastor spoke. But it's interesting now being a Lutheran that that's not as big of a deal.
Mm-hmm. Like for me, it
Like
never
it
mattered
helps. It's
how.
good.
Yeah, yeah, it does help. But for me, it never really mattered how well spoken the person was. I might not have been the most. I'm still not the most intelligent, even when it comes to theology. But I guess just something my grandpa had instilled in me was like doctrine matters, and uh, so I've just always would rather have something sound, and what my my understanding of what sound is has come from like Calvinistic IFB into a Lutheran understanding. But I've always wanted, like, if you said you believed this, but you're preaching this, that I didn't, I never liked that. And unfortunately, I don't want to say we saw it a lot, but we did see it. Uh, like mostly in the Methodist Church, but
Hmm.
uh, but yeah. So he asked me to do that, and like I hate public speaking. I hate I hate talking. Period. So it's odd that I'm doing a podcast. Um, but whenever he asked me to do it, like I was nervous. I was shot. I was like, all right, this sermon has to be at least 20 minutes, otherwise I'm wasting people's time here. I worked it out, rehearsed it, had it down in 20 minutes, and I got through it in about, I timed it, and I think it was like 11 minutes, which would be okay in a Lutheran church, but like, which it was okay there too, but
Yeah.
because his sermons were typically about like 30 35 minutes, I think. They could go longer, but as soon as I got up there, other than rushing through it, like my nerves were like dashed, and I felt like I was where I was supposed to be, and I was just like, "That's that's weird." But I didn't bring it up to anybody. But the pastor talked to me afterwards, and he was like, "Hey, I really think you should be a pastor. Like, I think you're being called." And I was like, "I don't know about that," but he kept talking to me about it. But he kept pushing me towards like Asbury, which is the Methodist. I guess it's technically non-denominational, but like 95% of Methodist pastors come out of Asbury. But it's pretty liberal, so I didn't want to go there. And but they kept pushing me towards that route, and I was no, I don't want to go to Asbury. Don't want to go to Asbury. I'm not Wesleyan. I would have just
Yeah.
been lying to be, and I don't agree with that. I like it. Because I wouldn't have taught Wesleyan theology or preached Wesleyan theology, and I would have just been a sham. And
Hmm.
but the after he had said that, I kind of felt like there was a at least a confirmation about it because somebody else was recognizing it and brought it up to me. Um, and then so whenever we went to the Baptist church, I wound up talking to the pastor about it after a little while, and but they were completely anti-intellectuals, like, oh, you don't need seminary, and it was like, no, I'm pretty stupid. I need an education, and
Yeah.
so I was like, this won't be the route for me either if I am to do it, and but I had looked at like Westminster a lot because I had leaned reformed, and but I don't know if it's still the uh like I'm actually being called because I started questioning his uh opinion, I guess you would say, because he recommended this book to me called Mystically Wired. I could only get through like one chapter, and it was straight up mysticism in that first chapter. And then like I kind of read the back, and I was like, yeah, it's just gonna be mysticism all the way through. I was like,
Which one was this?
this was the Methodist pastor that was trying to push me to go to
Mm.
Asbury, and I mean, I love the guy, but like I started whenever he was recommended that book to me and he gave it to me, I was like, I don't know if your judgment on maybe me being a pastor would be correct if you're recommending this book. But I've talked about it with our pastor a little bit, and he seemed excited about it. But since I'm new in Lutheran and uh, uh, I know it ain't going to happen anytime soon if it is an actual calling. But
Yeah.
yeah, so um, and if it ain't, I'll be completely okay with it. It ain't something I'd lose sleep over.
Yeah. Do you have a bachelor's already, right?
No, I only have an associate's, and but
Okay.
he said he was telling me that with my age and already having the associates, they have an alternate program where you don't need the bachelor's and you don't focus too
Oh,
much on the
nice.
language side of it, and so that, and then he also brought up the SMP and the special ministry program, and he said those would probably be the two best options with him leaning more towards the alternate program, and but
Oh, nice. Yeah.
but that, I mean, it was just a little talk we had for a couple hours one day, and it was,
Hmm.
but it might not ever flesh out. So, but and if it don't, I'd be okay with being a layman for the rest of my life, and because that's where God would want me. But
Yeah.
so to move things along and not hold you up, I know you got family and we all need sleep and everything. Um, man, every time I look at this, I thumb up my own post on Facebook to you. Uh, so the Lutheran church you're in, what's, if you're okay with stating it, what church is it?
It is Lamb of God Lutheran Church in Flower Mound, Texas. Um, so it's a confessional LCMS church.
Uh, do y'all do
Yep.
both like a divine service and like the contemporary service, or are y'all one service?
Yeah, they have two services. So they have an 8 a.m. traditional and then a 10:30, I think it is, 10:30 blended. So it's not a strictly contemporary service, which I appreciate. Um, but it has most of the pattern of the historic liturgy.
Yeah,
Um, but there are a few like contemporary or newer songs in certain places. So, but for the most part, it's very similar. I don't think there's no chanting
yeah.
in the blended, but there is in the traditional. Um, but I would prefer the traditional, to be honest. Um, but that's at 8 a.m. So it's
Yeah,
a little hard to get
yeah. You said you do or
the
you don't
family there.
prefer?
I think I would. I do. I
Yeah,
really appreciate the
yeah,
historical focus, and I think that's. I just. I think it's superior. I don't. I'm not.
hmm,
I'm not a purist. I'm not nearly
yeah,
as trad as some of my friends. So I don't think that doing a contemporary song is a bad thing,
yeah,
as long as the theology is
yeah.
solid,
Exactly.
and not heretical and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
So,
Oh,
but they'll do a few songs with like a piano and guitars and stuff like that.
uh,
So,
we're at a very very small church, and there's only one service. We're technically without a pastor, so our pastor we're borrowing from a guy who has to drive about 45 minutes away, maybe 50, somewhere in there. And probably not that long, but it's a decent drive for him. So
hmm,
he'll do an 8 a.m. contemporary service, do a 9:15 or 9:30 like Bible study, do a 10:30, 10:45 something like that, uh, traditional service, and then drive
hmm.
all the way to our church and do 1:30 service, and it's traditional. We do the chants
Hmm.
and all that. And did I tell you about
Love it.
our first visit? I did.
I don't know if you went into detail about it. Um,
So I had no clue what to expect. Unfortunately, my wife had to stay home because I think two of our girls were sick. So it wound up just being me, my son, and one of our other girls. And uh, when we get there, I had already talked to the elder, and like he had told me a little bit what to expect. And then when we got there, like they handed me the bulletin and kind of walked me through the bulletin before the service. And they're like, when you see this triangle near the hymn at the last verse, that means you stand up and blah 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 blah. So I wouldn't be completely lost, and it did help me a bunch. And
hmm.
so after the service, I was thinking, that was good, but that was different. And on the way home, I asked my son, I was like, what did you think about it? And he was like, they had a singing problem. That's a small congregation. And I was like, oh, I didn't think they sounded that bad. And that guy I talked to on the phone, the elder, like he's got a loud, like powerful voice, but he sings very well. I was like, heck, that one guy that was talking to us, I thought he sounded really good. And he was like, no, not that. They just sing everything. And I was like, oh. I
Yeah.
was like, yeah. I was like, yeah, that's different. We've never done that. And
Yeah.
but the kids have grown to really like it. I think they wish there was more kids there than there are, but they're happy, and I'm glad they're getting better teaching and whatnot now.
Yeah.
And
Hmm.
I would walk away like frustrated and be like, start breaking the sermon apart on the way home from the previous churches, and I'd be like, this is wrong, this is wrong,
Yeah.
this is
Yep.
wrong. And but now, like, I don't have to do that, and I'm so thankful. And
Hmm.
um
Yeah. I started getting like discontent with my previous church even before I was coming around to like Lutheran convictions about stuff.
mhm.
Um, and I was kind of in the same thing. I was like, I had to stop listening to like the podcasts that the staff members were doing. I
Yeah.
had to stop engaging with them on Twitter. Like it was like I had to stop
Mm.
looking to the pastoral staff for like pastoring,
Yeah.
shepherding, because
And it's
they
sad
were
when that
going
happens.
in. Yeah, yeah. And then it would be like, okay, what crappy song are we going to sing
Mhm.
today? What is the preacher going to say? Like it wasn't necessarily a preacher problem
Yeah.
all the time. Every once in a while there'd be something that would come out and I'd be like, I don't agree with that. And
Yeah.
but it was a mega church, so it's like I'm one voice in 5 to 7,000 or however
Yeah.
many people were there at the time.
Golly, I mean,
So they don't really care about me, right? Like
yeah,
from a numbers scheme of things,
yeah,
anyway. But it is very nice to go to a church where I'm still listening. I'm not sitting there saying I'm not turning my brain off, right?
yeah.
But not leaving frustrated,
Mm.
you know,
Yeah, I
or
would leave frustrated and then have to go to other sermons online and supplement. And I mean, while those sermons that I supplemented on were good and everything, it's just so much different than being like, hey, like this is my pastor, like saying this, and like regardless if he's famous and on the internet or not, like pastor we have now not on the internet at all, and I can be
mm-hmm.
like, I could point to my pastor and be like, this is what he said in a positive light, and like engaging with people on Twitter. Uh, there's this one guy that he refers to his pastor a lot versus referring to like other people who will be like, oh, John MacArthur says like this, like like he can go to his past or quote his own pastor who's not famous or anything like that. I don't know his name. I mean, I would if
Mm-hmm.
I'd remember it if I looked at it on my phone, but like he's just a another guy, but he can look to his pastor in that way, and like we can do that now too, and I'm very thankful for that.
Yeah. Yeah. Faithful pastors, like I was going to say, God bless your pastor for, doing that dual parish thing and
Yeah,
coming to serve you guys in word and sacrament. That's such a huge, like that's huge to me.
yeah,
As someone who grew up in a pastor's home and knows the kind of sacrifice that can entail sometimes, like,
yeah.
sometimes it's just part of what he's doing. And then other times it's probably pretty difficult.
Oh yeah, and
That's
then
a long
I try,
day, right?
yeah, and I try not to burden him with too many questions because I know he's got the other church he pastors at's quite a bit bigger than us, so I know he has like all of them to deal with, and I'll go to my elder for most of my questions, um,
Mhm.
just so I'm not putting too much of a burden on him. And oh, and then something else he did when I was in the hospital with uh pneumonia and sepsis and all that. It was on Easter, and he surprised me with a visit. Had no clue he was even coming. And
Hmm.
like I'm not
Yeah.
the type of person that I need my pastor to come visit me like when I'm in the hospital, like, and I'll be butthurt if he don't. Like I'm not like that. And I would have been completely okay if he never showed up. No feelings would have been hurt, but the fact that he did, it was just it
Yeah.
meant a lot. And
Mm-hmm.
but so like we're very blessed to have the pastor that we got. I want to have him on
Yeah.
here one day and talk about things. But him and his wife
Mm-hmm.
just had a baby, so I'm gonna let the baby get a little older and less stressful in the house before that happens.
Yeah, for real. But yeah, no, I know that like other pastors and other denominations do this too, but the willingness to like answer questions and like just serve the body
Hmm.
has been super refreshing. And the church I'm in is not, we're not small. It's not necessarily a mega church, but
Hmm.
we've probably got, there's probably a lot more in the role than show up on Sundays.
Yeah.
But most the services are both three quarters three quarters filled. There are
Hmm.
a couple hundred people probably in each service, so it's not tiny.
Yeah.
But the ability to like text one of my my pastors and ask them questions and asked for prayer and whatnot. It's been great. And
Yeah.
we even talked to early on. I was talking to a pastor at a friend's church in Plano, and this pastor offered. He didn't know us from Adam,
Hmm.
like we had met. I think we had met him once. And like in person once, and he offered to like drive like 30 miles one way in like an evening to like disciple me and my wife.
Yeah.
Like I was like, wow, like that's just, I mean, that's really, really kind of you, you know?
Yeah.
So not saying no, other denominations don't do that, but I definitely noticed just a really kind and like servant oriented heart in a lot of the
Yeah.
Lutheran pastors that I've dealt with. So it's really cool.
Uh yeah. I don't know if he does like house visits or anything like that. Um and I when pastors do that, I think it's good but not necessarily necessary. Um I know there's a few like reformed folk out there who like do emphasize for like pastors to do the home visits, and I think most people nowadays don't like that, but I do think it's good whenever a pastor like would come to your house and just be like check on you spiritually, like and visit, just have a little small chit chat, and uh but I don't think it's like one of those absolute necessary things that a pastor should do because already busy doing other stuff. Um, so you said
Hmm.
there's
Yeah, he'd probably be down for it though.
yeah. I definitely would like to invite him over for dinner one day, just out of appreciation for doing what he does, cook him a good meal. Which,
Yeah.
when I say that, that would be my wife cooking a meal, or take him out to eat or something. I'm not much of a cook.
Yeah.
I can grill pretty good, decent. I'm getting better at it. Inside an actual kitchen, I'm
Hmm.
hopeless. I'm very hopeless in a kitchen. I don't know why it translates better on a charcoal grill, but it does.
It's harder to mess up, I think,
Yeah.
on a grill. It's very forgiving,
Yeah.
and it makes a crappy steak like delicious.
Yeah. Man, the very
So
first steak I did was like probably Dollar Tree steaks. And I mean, they were paper thin. I was cooking it under, it was dark. I was cooking it under a cheap flashlight. I probably only needed to cook it like a minute on each side and it would have been done. Came out like beef jerky, but it tasted good.
yeah.
And
Yep.
uh, so you said there's about a couple hundred, or like about 100 so in each service.
Yeah, I'd say like
Yeah.
almost. I think there's fewer in the traditional because it's earlier, but there's a couple. There's almost maybe 170 to 200. I think is probably our average in
Yeah.
in both services, probably.
Yeah.
So,
We are a fraction of that, unfortunately. Our congregation, our uh sanctuary will hold about. Is that what Lutherans call it? Do they call it the sanctuary, or is it like, or do they have like a German word
I
for it?
think so. They might have an official name, but I think
I think
sanctuary is pretty universal.
yeah. So it at least gets the point across of what I'm trying to say. Um, so the
Yeah.
sanctuary holds a little over 200, I think, is the fire marshal recommendation. And since we've started going, on a good day, there's probably 30. this summer it's been really slim. Uh, and it is mostly an elderly congregation. Other than my kids, the only other kids that are there are basically grandkids. There is one family who shows up. I'm not sure how old the parents are, but their two girls are like 14, 15. And then there's like they're pretty much the only, besides mine, the only other kids that aren't grandkids to. Well, I guess technically they're grandkids to the organist, uh, but the organist's son and
Hmm.
his wife, attend and bring their own kids. But I do think it's good that the grandparents are trying to get their grandkids to kids there, and those kids range from like my kids' age all the way up to like 18ish, somewhere in there. So, uh, and that's also including that number is including those kids. So we are a small church. I do would like to hope and pray that we grow and the church doesn't just die off.
Yeah.
But we are in a very Pentabaptist Methodistal Costal, however you want to say it, area. So not a very strong Lutheran presence. Uh, and heck, I drive past. You said you drive past a Wells church on your way to your church. I get to drive past a Jehovah's Witness temple or whatever they call it.
Yeah.
And what's weird is they have two services, an English and a Spanish service. And
So, yeah.
and I got something in the mail from them one day during COVID, and I wanted to reply to it so bad, but I never did. I just wanted to see if they would actually talk to me, but I wound up chickening out and didn't respond.
So, our church is about 3 miles, maybe 3 miles away from us. Roughly, anyway,
Mm.
about under 10 minutes. So, one way to get there, leave my neighborhood. There's a well, no, not a Wells. There's a Wesleyan church, like basically immediately across the street.
Yeah.
Then there's a Baptist one and a Seventh Day Adventist. Then there's Wells. Then there's I think, Baha'i Faith. Then I go past a Calvary Chapel, um, a Church of Christ. There's a Catholic church building that I don't think is Catholic church anymore.
Mm.
They moved. And then my church, and then across the street from my church is a Southern Baptist, like a campus of a Southern Baptist mega church.
Yeah.
And that's like 5 or 6 big city block or suburban block types. So just within, that relative short distance. And then I think there's an Anglican church that meets at the YMCA,
Yeah,
right around there as well.
we don't have any Anglicans around us.
Yeah.
I think we have Episcopalian one, which I guess is just the liberal side of it, but we don't have like a conservative Anglican church around us. Uh, but like we drive about 10 minutes too, and we probably get to drive faster though being a country road. So mile wise, it's probably longer. Um, and we pass a bunch of Baptist churches, the Jehovah's Witness, a few charismatic churches. We pass a road that has another Baptist, the Methodist church that we went to, and another Wesleyan, the Nazarene denomination, um,
Mm-hmm.
and we don't actually pass those, but we pass the road, and they're all fairly close. And then a few Pentecostal, like charismatic churches, but and then one Roman Catholic church, and which is actually fairly close to our church. Building wise and like their grounds, it's a very beautiful building and area. But I've never even been on the property. Heck,
Yeah.
my family thinks I'm a papist anyway for being Lutheran. So I mean, I might as well just might as well go tour it.
Yeah. Yeah. There's a the Catholic church that used to be on one of the corners on our way to the Lutheran one. They I wish we could have their service schedule because they have a 4 p.m. Saturday mass.
Mhm.
And I'm like, man, I wish we had an evening Saturday evening service. That'd be great.
Yeah, that would be cool.
But we used to have a Saturday evening service at our old church,
Hmm.
um, and that was awesome. We loved that.
Do y'all do like a midweek service or midweek Bible study or anything like that?
So we have the service structure goes um, traditional, and then there's a Sunday school hour, like a Bible study or a Sunday school hour, and then the second service. So we do have some midweek services, but mainly on special feast days, like in Advent or Lent, stuff like that. So we don't necessarily, um, we don't every week.
Oh,
But yeah, there's
I can hear
sometimes there's
you
special
cut out.
ones, but it's not a constant thing. And I know that there's a lot of meetings that go on at the church. Um, like they do a celebrate recovery. They have grief share. Um, there's a few other kind of programs that are hosted at the church during the week. So there's a lot of people, or there's going to be people there a lot, but it's not an official service usually.
You there?
Yep.
All right. Don't know what happened. We had a hour and like 25 minutes on recording. I hopefully didn't lose it because I forgot to hit record on my other end as a backup.
It should be fine.
I'll just
Yeah, so
together.
because what it does is it records locally to your PC.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, it'll be there for you.
Okay.
It'll be in probably a couple different segments. So you might have to piece the audio together.
All right. I should be able to handle that. Um. So where were you when you cut out?
Oh shoot. Oh yeah, we were talking about like midweek services and that sort of thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Yep. So, oh yeah, so you probably didn't hear then because your picture froze, and I was like, well, I'll just keep going. It'll come back. Yeah, we don't have I don't not set midweek services. Lent, Advent, and a few other times there'll be like special midweek services. So like during Lent, there was a noon service and then a 6 p.m. or 7 p.m.
Mm-hmm.
So I got to go to a lot of the ones at noon during Lent, which was nice.
Yeah. Yeah. We do
So
that
yeah,
too.
during like the special feast times or yeah.
Yeah, that's when we do it too. The only downside is ours is elder led because pastor can't be in two places at once. And it would be really hard to, I think, make that work. One would have to be extremely late or extremely early when everybody's at work.
Yeah.
But I still like it. We still go to them, and definitely still
Mm-hmm.
beneficial. Um, do y'all do communion weekly, monthly, or how do y'all do it?
Oh, for the Lord's Supper?
Yeah,
Was that your question? Sorry, the
yeah,
first part of it
yeah.
cut out. Yeah, it's every service, every week.
Mhm. Do y'all use a common cup
So it's
or both the common cup and the little shot glasses?
they offer both. I prefer Common Cup.
Mm-hmm.
I'm yeah. I think it's just better. It's
Yeah,
cooler. It's
and then wine or grape
there's
juice.
theological reasons some people like it.
Yeah,
Wine.
yeah. So it's same
Yeah,
all across the
it's
board
really
here.
not. Yeah, it's really technically not communion if it's grape juice. Like,
Yeah.
so some people would argue with that, but
Mm. Yeah,
it is what it is.
I've never done common cup or wine before coming to this congregation, and but before we were communing members, I had been reading up, and I had actually been reading about common cup while I was reformed, and I was had been leaning towards that anyway. By the time we became communing members, and we offer both, but I use the common cup, and
Yeah,
I do think theologically that is the more correct route. And one of my Anglican friends
yeah.
on Twitter wind up because I wound up asking a question a while back. He shared something with me. At least I I think this Twitter friend is a he. It's kind of an anon account, but he shared something with me, and because I was trying to figure out when the use of shot glasses became prominent and why, and I was shocked to find, at least in what he shared with me, was that a bunch of different congregations, Baptist, I think maybe Pentecostal, but for sure Baptist and Methodist, were bragging about being the first ones to use the individual shot glasses. And it did start for hygiene reasons, but like the pride factor came in fairly quickly of like, oh no, we were the first. No, we were the first. No, we were the first. And the earliest
Hmm.
that this account could find was use. The first use was in a Methodist church, which they were also the first ones to introduce grape juice, which I always thought would have been Baptist. But what was also so shocking was it did start out as for hygiene, but how quickly it turned into individualism and not something we partake as the body of Christ together. And I was really surprised at how quickly it turned into this is just about me and Jesus and not about us communing together. And if you want, I'll send you that link that he sent me. It's kind of hard to read because it's like old
Yeah, man.
newspaper articles that were uh, Xerox or whatever the heck they did to get the old
Hmm.
newspapers on the computer. But it was a very interesting read, and and
Yeah,
then
send it to me. I'll check it out.
I guess to not hold you up too much longer, I do want to talk about what I didn't get a chance to finish it, but did you see where the Lutheran scholastics um talking about like the age of the earth?
I haven't watched it yet. No.
I've only watched about 20 minutes of it, and so far it's been really good. And I do hold to like young earth creation, grew up with that, and I still think that's uh the biblical account would be young earth creation. And it seems that for the most part that's the unanimous Lutheran view as well. But while I was watching it, I was thinking, and correct me if I'm wrong on this. I don't think it to be true, but I would think that if there was to have any gap anywhere, maybe from the time of creation of Adam and the fall. And my reasoning behind
Hmm.
this is because I have read where uh what historically what would be considered life, like we would consider like fish and stuff in the sea alive, but historically they wouldn't consider that life. So maybe the view of whenever Adam's age is started to be counted, maybe that started at the fall. I don't think that to be the case, but I was thinking maybe if
Hmm.
anywhere there could be a gap, it would be that. But I don't think that's the case. What are your thoughts on that?
Um. Okay, so I'm looking it up right now. The Age of the Earth, a Bayesian approach, I think is how you say it. Um, that's interesting because I'm pretty comfortable being young Earth creationist.
Yeah.
Um, kind of how I grew up, how I think the based on the genealogies
Hmm.
and just kind of a natural reading of the text.
Hmm.
I lean towards young Earth creationism. I wouldn't say I'm completely dogmatic on it because I haven't spent a ton of time examining the other views. Um, and I think the only other one I would really bother considering would be kind of that old Earth, potential old Earth.
Hmm.
But theistic evolution would be completely out because
Yeah.
I mean that
Yeah.
means death
Definitely.
comes before the fall.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, so yeah, I'll have to check that out because I think I would tend to basically immediately fall to young Earth.
Yeah. I
Um,
definitely do too.
but
I
I
would
have
just.
heard of some of like the gap theories.
Mhm. I don't think most gap
Yeah.
theories hold, and this one that I propose I've never heard of, or maybe I have, and I'm just subconsciously remembering it. Um,
Hmm.
but at least in that thought, that would be seem to be the only one that would work, at least in my mind. But I don't think that to be the case. I am young Earth creation, and uh,
Yeah.
but I used to use it as a litmus test. Like, oh, you think the Earth is older than blah blah blah. You're a liberal, and you aren't going to heaven. And I don't. I'm not that
Yeah.
dogmatic about it anymore.
Yeah. I think that Jesus obviously referred to Adam and Eve as and other
Hmm.
figures in the Old Testament as historical figures.
Yeah.
Um, so I don't doubt that they are first ancestors, that sort of
Hmm.
thing. The exact age, I mean, I grew up. There was people in the IFB movement that they had charts and stuff. They claim they knew exactly like what year.
Yeah.
Um, I mean, what is it? What young Earth is? What 6 to 10,000 years? I think they kind of give that
Yeah.
leeway of like, um, So I think that makes a lot more sense. Even though secularly it's laughed at, but
Yeah.
from everything we've seen, I mean, makes sense. Guy trusts God over man, so
Oh yeah. Well,
but yeah, that's interesting.
I mean, we've been going for about an hour and a half, probably a little bit longer, and I'm on the free one, and I think the time is almost up, and it's getting late. I don't want to hold you too long, so thank you for coming on. Oh, real quick though, what are you reading right now?
Ooh, that's a good question. So I have a number of books that I have started, but I kind of hop around because I have a very
Yeah.
short attention span right now. So I just got this one. It's called As It Is in Heaven, and it's from an Anglican perspective,
Mhm.
but it's about the tagline is a biblical, historical, and theological introduction to the traditional church and her worship. Um, so I'm interested to dig into that one. I'm in the middle or almost done with liturgical worship by Dr. Jordan Cooper.
I've got that on my
It's
list.
yeah, it's good. I mean, it's good entry level. Why we worship the way we worship.
No, I
But I am
lied.
interested to see other high church traditions.
Yeah, I lied. I just looked. I've got "Baptized into Christ" by Cooper.
Mm. Oh, sweet. Yeah, and then I've got a bunch of other books that I've got a bunch of other books that I actually haven't read yet, but I have on my my in my headboard.
Yeah,
I have Mere Christendom by Doug Wilson. Um, Christian The Case for Christian Nationalism by Stephen Wolfe, who is a bit
yeah,
of controversial in some areas, but I wanted to read his book for myself.
yeah,
So, and then I've got a few others that are kind of. I tend to want to read theology a lot,
mm,
and I don't always succeed. I usually
yeah.
end up watching videos on my phone instead. So,
Yeah, I'm actually reading the Way of Salvation by George. What's his name? George. I don't know how
is
to
it
pronounce
Gerberding?
it. Yeah, yeah. And
Yeah, I've got that on my shelf back there.
so I'm on chapter 8 right now, and so far I'm really liking it. And
Hmm.
uh, I've actually got 3 books that I don't. I say I got them. They're on my list of wanting to read, but it's about
Mhm.
like demon possession, and it's one's from a Lutheran perspective, one's Anglican, and one's Reformed. And I'm just wanting
Nice.
to. I'd have to look at. I'm not going to do it right now to see what the titles are, but uh, the Anglican
Yeah.
perspective one, even used the cheapest I can find. It's like $40, and it's like, oh man,
Oh
really?
wow.
So that'll be a while before I get that.
Yeah. One that I recommend. This isn't about demon possession, but it's called Led by the Spirit,
Yeah,
and it's by a Lutheran, and he's talking about like the secondary is how charismatic is New Testament Christianity. So, because my former church was becoming charismatic, essentially,
yeah,
they would call themselves continuationists, with flirting with the charismatic label. I
hmm,
think they backed off of it now a bit because people push back. um, but I wanted to kind of read a Luther, and I've read another one as well that was a more reformed take on the gifts. This one is a bit more middle of the road, not charismatic, but not cessationist. So I thought it was actually a
yeah,
really balanced biblical treatment of everything. So that one's definitely. I think I got that from Concordia Publishing, um, but it is on Amazon as well. I just think it's marked up a bit there. So
yeah. All
Yeah.
right. Well,
I enjoy, man. I enjoy reading theology a lot.
mhm.
I enjoy thinking about reading theology. And then just with kind of our work schedule and stuff right now, and like R and relaxation schedule, I tend to not. And I've started about 3 or 4 different books and
Yeah.
haven't finished one in a while. But yeah, I could read them for reference. I'll say that I'm reading for reference.
Yeah. Well, Micah, I ain't gonna hold you any longer. I don't have anything else. Um, I will plug your podcast. You want me to plug your Twitter handle, or would you rather not have that?
No, yeah, you can plug that as well. Thanks for having me on, man. This has been
Yeah.
a pleasure.
Yeah.
I enjoy just hanging out and chatting, and
Yeah.
this is what we kind of want to do on City Square podcast.
Mhm.
So we hope that if you enjoy this, you'll enjoy that too.
Yeah. And I enjoyed having you on, and thank you. I am gonna cue the exit bumper music, and you have a good one.
You as well, man.